Hi, I'm Liv from NeuroStitches. Today, I'm here to talk about autism, specifically within the knit and crochet communities, and to provide an update on the blog post I wrote about the Knit Stars autism controversy. If you haven't read my blog post yet, I don't think this video will make a lot of sense, so I would pause this video, click the link in the description to read the blog post, and then come back to this video. I'm an autistic and ADHD knitter and crochet pattern designer. So I created NeuroStitches to be an online peer support community connecting neurodivergent folks through fiber arts such as knit and crochet. So first, I'm going to give some background on the blog post that I wrote and then provide an update regarding my discussions with Shelly that happened via email prior to her public statement. And finally, I'll end with how I feel and where I stand now. So first, I just want to say that this is not easy for me. I prefer written communication. I believe I'm more articulate, and I just prefer written communication, as I just proved. So I have my notes here, and I will be referencing them quite a bit through this, so please just be patient with me. I'm also going to be knitting and crocheting throughout the video because knit and crochet are very common stems for autistic and ADHD, generally neurodivergent people. And stimming is repetitive movements that help regulate your nervous and emotional system. That's why. Some think that I wrote the blog post to start drama, and others think I didn't go far enough or that I was too nice. And I just want to say right off the bat, there is a big difference between petty drama within the community and this issue. This issue is very important, especially right now given current events. It is very important that we break down these stereotypes and misinformation that is being spread by some of our leaders, RFK Jr., and other people. And so that's why I wanted to speak up about it, because the Knit Stars marketing and the ads, and I just kept seeing them. Every time I would see them, I just kept hearing the words, about curing autism or recovering from autism and stuff. And with the new surge in PR, people are going to be buying Shelly's book. It's still for sale. I bought a copy in order to write the blog post. And there is harmful misinformation in that book. Ultimately, I'm not going to be able to please everyone, which is a hard thing for me to try and accept. As Taylor Swift said, I'm a pathological people pleaser. So I'm not going to be able to please everyone. So I just need to stay true to myself. And my mother taught me that if you want to change people's minds, you're going to catch more flies with honey than vinegar. But she also taught me the importance of having limits and boundaries to that. So that was my whole goal in writing the blog post, is I was hoping to change people's minds about autism and about these harmful stereotypes and just the completely inaccurate information that was spread through this book. The other thing that I want to outline is that it's not like I dug up a tweet from a decade ago and I'm dredging this up and trying to cancel Shelly. That's not at all what happened. Shelly wrote this book in 2021, and a second edition was published in 2022, and she went on the podcast, Turn Autism Around, in 2021. That was not that long ago. And the information that she espouses in her book and advocates for like special diets to cure autism and recover from autism, it's not like she speaks about that in the past, like how she viewed it in the 90s. Like, I understand in the 90s, our understanding of autism is very different than it is today. We know more now and everything. I'm not here to rake someone over the coals over something that it used to be. What I have a problem with is the fact that this information was being advocated for and stated in the past 4 years. Also, this was a book that Shelley published, and she's the one who brought autism into the conversation. She credits her son's autism diagnosis as opening up a well of energy in her that allowed her to open the yarn shop and create her business. And that was all published in her book. So I wrote this blog post to hopefully educate, dismantle some misinformation and stereotypes, and also to give someone an opportunity to learn, grow, and apologize. Ultimately, it's up to that person whether to accept that challenge, but at least I know I was respectful and I gave someone a chance, but I also stood up for myself and my fellow autistics. And there's a big difference between canceling someone in cancel culture and boycotting and letting your dollars speak. Because I give someone a chance, but then if they don't live up to their promises or their end of the bargain, then I let my dollars speak and I don't support a business that espouses these views. Also, it is extremely scary to put yourself out there, and as some people have put it, for me, to call out a show that's associated with the biggest names in the fiber arts industry. To me, I wasn't calling out anyone. I was just trying to raise awareness and hopefully change some people's minds and educate people about autistic people. I'm a brand new pattern designer. I only have 3 patterns published with 2 more on the way. And so I was really nervous about putting this blog post out there and this video. And I am a what's called low support needs autistic, or as I like to call it, a level 1 autistic. And I was also late diagnosed. So this led to a lifetime of masking, what you're seeing here. My hair is done, I have makeup on, and I'm shoving down all my uncomfortableness. I know it's eking through, but to put this video out there. So what I ask is, please don't underestimate the power of your words and your comments on other people as we dig into this discussion. I spent the last 2 days in just complete shutdown. I couldn't even bear to have my phone on. It stayed shut off and in a drawer in our kitchen, and I couldn't leave the house. I am blessed, and I say that with sarcasm, with having the autistic sense of justice, but also the fear of being perceived. Social media is very scary for me. Yeah. So just please be kind, and let's get into it. So just a little bit of background on how I came to write the blog post. In our NeuroStitches community on our Discord server, we have a chat channel where we talk about what we are watching or listening to while we crochet and knit. And so sometimes fiber arts and yarn related channels, like YouTube channels and stuff, will be posted in there and everything. And so I had come across Knit Stars and I posted about it in our Discord, this channel. And I was like, does anyone know what Knit Stars is? I don't really understand what it is. Is it like a membership community, but it looks like a documentary? I'm very confused. I go into digging into it later on. I learn, and this was back in, I posted about this in June of 2024 in our server. But then I looked into it, and I was really excited at first because here is this really successful businesswoman in the fiber arts industry. She opened up a local yarn shop, and who among us has not dreamed of opening up a local yarn shop? And she had an autistic son. So I was like really excited to learn from this person and everything. And then I saw she had a book, and I'm a bookworm. So I immediately Googled the book because I was like, oh my gosh, I want to read about this. This is a business book about the fiber arts industry. And I came across a podcast that she did, as I'm sure it was like PR promotion for the book. She appeared on this podcast called Turn Autism Around. And unfortunately, I watched it and heard the way that she and the podcast host, called Dr. Mary Barbera, and who, according to Dr. Mary's LinkedIn profile, has a PhD in corporate leadership, but is an ABA autistic therapist. I'll just leave it at that. And like my heart sank the way that they were speaking about autistic people, talking about being normal, and Shelley lamenting about how it's actually harder on her and her son because people assume he's normal versus higher support needs autistic person. Which again, I can't even get into all of this stuff because we'll be here for hours, but I'll leave it at that. So that's how I first came to learn about this. I was actually planning on writing a blog post about Shelley's book and the problems with it. And I was searching and searching because I didn't want to buy a copy. I was trying to find a copy within our local library. And so I spent like a week trying to hunt down a copy of this, and I ultimately couldn't find one. But I'm a big believer in you shouldn't criticize anything unless you've watched it, heard it, or read it first. So I bought the ebook version. And so anyways, while I was trying to find a copy at one of our libraries, Ross from the We Yarn Company, he actually wrote a great Instagram post with the caption, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend reading it. He was the catalyst that started like all of this, and him and I have been conversing and talking about stuff, and neither one of us, neither me nor Ross, were the first ones to bring up this issue. This issue has been around since 2021 when Shelley first published the book. And then the second edition was published in 2022. So you can see there's discussions all over the internet about this from way before me and Ross. But anyways, Ross was like the catalyst that got this started. And it's my understanding that Ross tried to talk to some former Knit Stars, current Knit Stars, and Shelley or something. I'm not sure the full details, but Shelley blocked him from the Knit Stars Instagram, which I found ironic given that Shelley spends so much of her book, the entire theme of her book is empathy. And in her TEDx talk, she talks about having difficult conversations, and she champions that she created these safe spaces with Knit and Crochet to have really difficult and transformative conversations around tough issues like gun rights, end of life, LGBTQ rights, and other stuff that she referenced. So anyways, I ended my blog post with a call to action. I asked for 3 things of Shelley and the Knit Stars. First, I wanted a public statement and a retraction about Shelley's claims in her book and the comments that she's made in the past about autism. Second, I asked her to please stop reprinting her book. And third, I asked her to please use her platform to bolster and feature autistic creators. And I really want to emphasize this point here. I talked about this in my blog post, but it's very important. Around 80 to 85% of autistic adults are either unemployed or underemployed. 80 to 85%. I want you to sit with that number. Okay? So many autistic people are forced to be self-employed due to workplace and employment discrimination, or not being considered disabled enough to qualify for disability benefits. And I used to be part of the 20% that was employed until I experienced employment discrimination. I was a tax attorney, and I disclosed my autism diagnosis, requested reasonable accommodations, and they never met with me once about it. They just fired me. They said that they determined that I could no longer perform my job. And I am a big believer in the fact of, I think a lot of that was because of harmful stereotypes and misinformation people had about autism. I think that some of the higher ups heard that I was diagnosed with autism and they thought I couldn't be an attorney anymore, even though I was basically just asking to work from home. Anyways, we're getting off topic. I will stay on topic. That's another video for another time. My point is that with the severe unemployment rate, a lot of autistic people are forced to be self-employed. They don't have any other choice. And then also, we've got current events that are frankly scaring the shit out of autistic people. RFK Jr. just keeps continuing to spread lies, misinformation, and stereotypes about autistic people. We need allies and support now more than ever. And the fiber arts industry has so many talented autistic fiber artists. Some of my favorite yarn dyers are autistic. So I called on Shelly, the Knit Stars, and you, the reader. We need your support. And I also highlighted in my blog post that I started an autistic-owned business directory for businesses in or related to the fiber arts industry. So I encouraged people to buy a pattern from an autistic pattern designer or an autistic notions maker or an autistic yarn dyer, or to support us for free by following us on social media, liking and sharing our posts. And so that's where I left things. And now let's get into the update of what happened after I posted this. So I was surprised when I got an email from Shelly. I knew that Shelly was being made aware of my blog post, but I didn't expect her to actually email me and reach out. And the point of my blog post is that these conversations, these difficult conversations that Shelly has championed hosting in the past, should be happening in public. Because what we were seeing, we heard from former and current Knit Stars that they were having private conversations one-on-one with Shelly, where she was reassuring them like, oh, I don't believe that anymore. I'm vaccinated, my kids are vaccinated, and we'll get into the issues with that anyways later on. But so she was having these private one-on-one conversations. And so because I advocate that these kind of conversations should happen in public, I'm going to share my email exchange with Shelly. So I got an email from Shelly that said she read my thoughtful blog post and she wanted to start by thanking me for taking the time to reach out to a Knit Star and have a direct conversation. And when we can dialogue directly with each other, we can find real understanding and create positive change together. So then she goes into saying a very similar statement that she put out as her public statement. And she said, emphasized that it was her family's personal journey with an autism diagnosis 28 years ago, and it was published in 2021, although I actually wrote it a couple years before that. And in early 2021, I went on a number of podcasts as part of the commitment with my publisher. I've learned a lot every year since that first diagnosis, including the years since my book was published. I am really grateful. There is so much more understanding, resources, and information available today. And I also agree there's a long way to go. Then she said, let me be clear on where I stand today. And this is a direct quote. I am not and have never been anti-vax. I and all three of my grown children are fully vaccinated. I believe in the science, and I find RFK Jr.'s statements on vaccines, and especially his recent rhetoric on autism, to be damaging and deplorable. I would never want my book, which I wrote with the intention of helping others, to cause harm, especially to the autistic community. And yet I recognize, in light of what we now know, it might have done just that. You asked 3 things of me in your email and your blog post. And again, I appreciate your directness and clarity. Autism. Let me address each request. First, she says that there are no plans to reprint the book. The book is no longer offered for sale on our website and hasn't been for quite some time. Second, she says, I reached out to Hay House and they have confirmed that they can add an author's note to the Kindle version of the book. I am working on a draft of that note. And finally, she says, my intent is to make a public statement in my weekly newsletter in the coming weeks. I would love, with your permission, to share a link to your Autistic Business Owners Directory in the newsletter. Thank you again for the blog post. I look forward to hearing from you about the newsletter link. So I took a bit to think about this response. And I emailed her back and I just said, hi, Shelley. Thank you for taking the time to respond. I do have some concerns. I shared how your words and actions hurt me, so I was disappointed that your email was missing an apology. The point of my blog post was a public apology and to have these conversations in public. Which leads me to the next issue. Sharing a statement in an email list is not public. Would people have to sign up to your email list to access the apology? Will you post the apology on your website or social media? People who don't subscribe to your newsletter should be able to access your statement. Before I give permission to attach my name and website to your public statement, I would like to review your statement. I'm sure, as someone in the branding world, you understand. Additionally, there is a lack of accountability for the things you wrote and said. None of my concerns were addressed except to deny you are or ever were anti-vax. However, in your book on page 85, you clearly state, quote, suddenly everything started to make sense. And then she starts listing things. And one of the things that she lists is, quote, the loss of some speech after her autistic son's 12-month immunizations, which at that time still all contained mercury. So this is being anti-vax and contributing to the false narrative that vaccines cause autism. The statements made in your book cannot all be attributed to outdated information. You stated in your book, quote, I know this is a controversial statement to make, end quote, when she was declaring that her son was recovered from autism. If you no longer believe what you said in your book, then you should make that clear to everyone. There is a lot of fear and turmoil in the autistic community right now. With your following and your platform, you could provide real assurances to people who need them now more than ever. I understand publisher commitments, but the problem isn't just that you went on a podcast called Turn Autism Around. It's also the content of what you said on that podcast that I found troubling. Can you promise to refrain from reprinting the book in the future? I understand there are no current plans, but it would mean so much to have that reassurance. Additionally, the ebook is still being sold as I bought a copy to write the blog post. In your book, you rightly champion having difficult conversations and empathy. I understand that prior to my post, you were aware of these concerns, but blocked fellow autistics when they've raised these concerns. I would love to see these conversations, like we are having now, include other autistic people, as I don't speak for all autistic people. I appreciate the opportunity to engage in this dialogue with you and look forward to your response. After that, this is the final email in this exchange, and it's much shorter. Shelley responded back to me, hi again, Olivia. Thank you for your thoughtful response. First, you are right. I should have apologized for hurting you. Between yesterday when I emailed you and today, I've been thinking and realized I regret it might have caused harm is not the same as I'm sorry for causing harm. I am sorry for causing harm and I sincerely apologize. Also, since yesterday, I realized the post needs to happen publicly rather than in my newsletter. I won't mention your name or website in my public statement. I feel confident the physical book won't be published again. To be able to make further assurances, I need to have more discussion with Hay House, the publisher, which I will expedite. I'll also reach out to the podcast you mentioned and ask them to remove it. I look forward to more discourse with you, other autistics, and other neurodivergent folks in the future, and will continue to actively seek out ways to support. Thank you for what you are doing with your list. It is important work. I appreciate that work and the chance to dialogue with you as well. So, I have a lot of thoughts about this. First, I do want to thank Shelley for making a public apology. Admitting that you're wrong, especially in a public way, it's not an easy thing to do. So I am saying thank you to Shelley for her public apology. However, I have some real concerns still. First, the email that her first email she sent me, I got the impression that she was trying to smooth things over with me in the same way that she was doing with one-on-one with current and former knit stars, hoping to smooth it over and offering to provide a link to my website in her public statement. And I don't think she was expecting me to push back in my email and the reason that I say that is because you'll notice that in her second email to me, she basically rescinded the offer to include a link to the Autistic Business Owners Directory, which is on my website, NeuroStitches. I also find it really problematic that she first was going to post this apology, or not apology, statement in her newsletter, which also just feels, to be frank, it feels a little slimy because you're trying to get people to sign up for your newsletter in order to access this statement. I don't know. That's why I asked, would people have to be signed up to get it? And she didn't answer those questions. So that was just my first thoughts on it. She also did not address any of my concerns and ignored them except for the anti-vax thing. She really, that's the only one that she addressed. And I find it interesting that in her first email to me, she said that she has never been anti-vax. And then when I pointed out that excerpt in her book and said that is being anti-vax, I noticed that the whole I have never been anti-vax was missing from her public statement. So it seemed like she did make adjustments to her statement based on what I said to her. Also, it was never just about being anti-vax. The rhetoric and language used talking about autistic people and the ABA therapy and encouraging people to try these special diets as a treatment for autism, which in my blog post, I also linked to a Mayo Clinic article stating very directly that there is no evidence that diets can treat or cure autism. I also felt like her public statement that she ended up putting out on Instagram deflected and minimized. I think she was wanting people to think that this was a very long time ago, and I dug into her personal past and dug up a tweet from a decade ago and trying to cancel her for that. And that's not at all what I was trying to do. And I just want to emphasize that this was not that long ago. This was 2021 and 2022. The second edition of the book was published in 2022. And it's not like in the book she says, hey, I used to think these things and now I know better. She was speaking in the present tense and advocating these things and everything. And also to say she said, I wrote the book several years ago, but it was published in 2021. That's like me saying, I'm going to put out a paper that I wrote in high school and publish it now and stand by everything that I wrote and not make changes to anything that I was like completely wrong about. So that to me just doesn't really hold up. And also the podcast. Even if she did write the book several years before 2021, the podcast happened in 2021. She was speaking present tense, and you can just watch the podcast for yourself and make up your own opinion. There's a link to it in my blog post. So now I can thank someone for an apology, but also think that apology misses the mark. And so I think a lot of people assume that if just because I thanked her for an apology, everything's hunky-dory and I'm good and cool with everything. And I'm not, because I asked 3 things of her and she made the public apology. The other 2 things have yet to be seen. I brought up the fact, so she said there are no plans to reprint the book, which is fine, but that book, the ebook, is still for sale. I was able to buy a copy recently. So there's that she just completely ignored. And then also she offered to promote the Autistic Business Directory, but then stated in her second email, she rescinded it. She said, I won't include it. And the thing is, all I said was I just wanted to review the statement before attaching my name, which I feel like is a very fair thing to do. And especially as someone who ran a branding company and stuff, she should understand and empathize with that. So really where I stand now is, yeah, she did apologize. I personally don't think that the apology was enough because she completely ignored all of my concerns, did not address a single one of them except for the anti-vax thing. But I find it troubling that she ignored everything else and didn't address those things. And also seemingly minimized and deflected in her public statement that she posted to Instagram. So where I stand now is I hope that this encourages more respectful dialogue and raises awareness about the issues, the stigma, the false information that autistic people face. And I would really like to see Shelley live up to the promise to support autistic creators in the fiber arts industry. I'm a little disappointed because it wasn't exactly like I asked for the 3 things and she's really only come through on one of them. So I guess we're going to have to wait and see if Shelley follows through on her promises to help bolster and support autistic creators in the fiber arts industry. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on the public apology and where you stand now. Is KnitStars going to be something that you still watch or support? Or are you just going to try and support those creators directly and bypass the KnitStars show? I would really like to brainstorm with other autistic people in the fiber arts industry on ideas that we could possibly give Shelley on how she can support and promote autistic creators within the fiber arts industry. So if you have any ideas, please post them below. And also, please be kind in your comments. And please be sure to check out the Autistic Owned Business Directory on neurostitches.com and support a fellow autistic fiber artist. Thanks for listening and have a great rest of your day.